Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday night workshop for our month of November. It is a little chilly outside right now, but that's nice. Not as cold as the people are in the East, which I'm grateful for. Anyway, I know that it's the eve before Thanksgiving, so I first wanted to thank all of our Omega family for being a part of the Omega Spirit and keeping said spirit alive. All of our volunteers and participants and people who help donate, which I will mention that funds are a little low right now, so we don't have the money to put down for reserving rooms next year. So there'll be a letter going out soon to talk about that, but I just thought I'd let you know in advance, Christmas giving, Black Friday, save a little money for Omega. Tonight's topic is the idea of divine intervention and recognizing divine intervention. Now, this is a very interesting topic. George, as a matter of fact, did talk about the distinction between the two theologies of free will versus destiny. Destiny, of course, is based upon John Calvin, Calvinism. He was a 15th century theologian, French theologian. And then Arminianism, which is the philosophy or the theology of free will. So that was Jacobus Arminius. He was Dutch. So we have, and he was in the 15th century as well, but he was towards the later part of the century. So we have the two individuals talking about the very distinct ways of existence. What is our interaction with God, if you want to call it, the divine being, universal consciousness, higher power, whatever your word is to connect you to that. I'm just using the word God because it's a universal, everyone understands that. So, Calvinism talks about the idea that God is predestined. Everything is predestined. He's got his hand in everything. So that means that, when you fall down the stairs, yep, you were supposed to fall down the stairs. Everything is mapped out for us. We're just kind of having the experience. And of course, Arminianism, free will, on that side is we have a choice and we choose our destiny. We choose the way we go. Now, this is a debate that I am not going to even get into. The idea or concept that I want to focus more on is the divine intervention. Are there times when there's an intervention that we weren't expecting and it ends up being out for our benefit, comes to our benefit? So when we think about the word intervention, that means to intervene or interject. And if you were to look this up in the dictionary, it talks about the idea of changing course. Now, anyone who's ever had an intervention, family members get together and they want to intervene, and typically this has to do with addictions, whether they're addicted to drugs or alcohol or having an affair, family things, whatnot. The concept is that people who love you come together and intervene to change the course that you're headed on. And sometimes this is well-wishing, and sometimes it's not. I'm thinking of very dominant or controlling parents who are absolutely certain this is the way your children should go and intervene. The history is filled with stories of parents who want their child to marry a certain individual or go a certain path, the farmer who wants his son to follow in his footsteps, the mother who wants her daughter to marry the money and success to get out of poverty and whatnot. So intervention, the idea connecting this back to divine intervention. So divinity, of course, that's what we're talking about, something divine, beyond me, beyond us as human beings, a divine plan spirit. The idea, I would say, when it comes to divinity, is how do we know if it's God or is it me or someone else? Like, how do I know, and is it really worth what I'm doing? Is it really the path that I want to go on, the most beneficial for all? I was thinking of times in my life where I've had the experience of things not going the way that I wanted them to go, or was forcing them to go, and 9 times out of 10 I discover that that wasn't really what was going to be beneficial, because I was short-sighted. So of course then we have the concept of introducing the big picture theory, not being able to see the forest through the trees. I'm so focused on one little element, I'm not seeing the whole picture. And then of course there are those who are so focused on the forest they can't see the trees. So there's got to be a balance and a harmony between the two. And that's pretty much where I fall into play between Calvinism and Arminianism, free will versus destiny. I think it's both. I think there's the idea that I have free will of what I'm doing, but yet there's a destiny or purpose, guidelines, boundaries. I think I've said this before, the concept of being on a ship. If I'm on a ship leaving from New York to London and I'm crossing the ocean, that's the destiny. I'm on the journey, but I'm free to do whatever I want on the ship. I can come and go in and out, as long as I stay on the confines of the ship. And that's how I see how the two kind of balance each other out. There's a bit of predestiny and there's a bit of free will. But again, now focusing back on the idea of divinity, something outside of myself, divine, which is something beyond me, outside of me, influencing. Now, it's not hard for us to understand an outside influence. We're influenced by the weather. We can be influenced by traffic. As a matter of fact, today I was very much influenced by shoppers who were not very courteous, which I find very curious. Right around Thanksgiving and the holidays, when we're supposed to be grateful, you got people griping and complaining and pushing and cutting in line and whatnot. It amazes me. So anyway, I'm influenced by the shoppers. We can be influenced by our family members, our spouses, our children, our parents, job, location. There's so much that can be an outside influence. So when I say divinity, I'm really not talking about those influences that I can identify. I'm speaking about influences that are difficult to identify. And I'm not trying to be woo-woo about that. I don't even know if they say that anymore, woo-woo, but I'm not wanting to go off center here. But there appears to be times in our lives when things happen and we can't quite understand how, but it ends up being for our benefit. And how we are swayed with our emotions. When things are pleasing to us, we're so happy. When things don't go the way we want, we get angry and upset. And what would it be like if I didn't get angry and upset when things didn't go the way I wanted? Perhaps, maybe, that's a better situation. So when I was thinking about this concept, I was thinking again, the reason why I wanted to introduce destiny and free will is because sometimes I am focused on what I want. We are focused on what we want. For example, Thanksgiving is coming up. I can imagine how many parents, how many people, family members are cooking right now in preparation for tomorrow. And there's that philosophy of Murphy's Law. If it's going to go wrong, it will. How many times electricity goes out, or the turkey doesn't get cooked right, or you drop it in the hot oil and it flies up. There's so many different scenarios that occur where things don't work out the way that we want them to work out. And yet, family still comes together and we still celebrate. And we make the best out of whatever catastrophe may unfold. So is it divine intervention that things don't go the way that we want them to? Is it divine intervention of spoiling a meal? I don't know. I don't have that idea or an answer to that question. But that's why I wanted to introduce destiny and free will. If I am focused on what it is that I want, if we are focused on a direct goal, those are great. The idea of having a goal, something to strive for, that's fantastic. Expectations it's a tricky area. When I have an expectation, I have an emotional attachment. And if things don't unfold the way I want them to, I get emotionally upset. So perhaps maybe the clue would be to disengage my emotion, to set forth a plan, to set forth a goal, and then ride it. See what happens. Go with the flow. If this doesn't work, we'll go here. As I stated earlier, the idea of being on the ship, I can come and go, but I'm still on the ship. I go up, I can go down, I can go into the casinos, into the shows, go swimming, but I'm still on the ship. So I still have decisions, but the emotion is already set into play. You already understand that. So when I pull back and look at the big picture, I come to the understanding that I am just another member on the ship, another member of the human race. You are another member, another person participating in life on this planet. I wouldn't even begin to explain why we're here, where we're going, what's the point of it all. I have no idea. In my own small little universe, that's all I'm capable of understanding of what I've been interacting with. Just as the same for you. You're only capable of understanding your universe. Oh yeah, we have commonalities and similarities. And some of you might trip on your own words as well. So all of that, we have understanding, but we all just recognize that we're one piece of the puzzle, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So what I wanted to do was tell a story. I had a wonderful experience in my life. I've had many experiences in my life, but I had a wonderful experience that really captured my attention on how little I actually know of things unfolding. So as many of you know, I've done teen programs before, and I was doing this teen program, and there was a story. So let me back up for a second. The story is this little boy. He was very close to his mom and had an older sibling, and mother died of cancer. He stayed with her. The father was really struggling with it, so he was barely around. And this little boy actually happened to be with his mom when she passed away. He was devastated. He was young. I want to say maybe 13. I'm calling him a little boy, but teenager. We should just say teenager. So he's a very young teenager, very attached to his mom, devastated when she died. Within 6 months, father remarried, and this young man was acting out, rightfully so. His mother died, he's young, his father's never around, and so he's acting out, as teenagers do. And the new wife said, nope, and so sent this little kid to go live with a relative. So here, in a very short span of time, within a year, his mother dies, father gets remarried, and then the father doesn't want him and sends him away to go live with a relative. Now, back to me doing the teen program. I'm about to launch off to do a teen program. It was up in Prescott, which for those of you who don't know, it's about an hour and a half north of Phoenix. We were doing a high ropes course. It was away for the weekend. So I had about 25 kids, maybe 30 teenagers with us. And so his relative got a hold of me and asked if I could add him. Because they just didn't know what else to do. He was acting out, he's fighting, failing school, just really didn't know what else to do. Counselors weren't helping, and this relative was very worried about the teenager to make sure that they didn't go on the right path. So perhaps maybe the relative was wanting to have a course put in action. So there's an expectation, obviously. But there's nothing wrong with that. We do have expectations for our children and guardians, the ones what we are in charge of. So this teenager comes with us, fighting with everybody else on the bus all the way up, acting out, very loud. I see him eating packets of sugar. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to have craziness, absolute craziness. So about a day and a half goes by, maybe about a day. They're out on lunch, and I see this young boy pick up a horseshoe and throw it at one of the other participants, missing her head by maybe this much. Now, my job is the protection of the kids, naturally, and nonviolence. I mean, that's what we're teaching, trying to get along and whatnot. I yell this kid's name, call him to me, and I'm like, absolutely unacceptable. So he starts yelling at me, saying that she pushed him and he was just paying her back and blah, 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 blah. And long story short, he gets to a point where I'm done. I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go home. Okay. Now what do we do? Because buses are gone, we're stranded up there. So we call a big old meeting, and now none of this is on my agenda. I have activities planned out. None of this is in my activities. It's like, okay, here we go. This is what we have to do. So everyone comes into the great hall, and he is so angry, he picks up his chair and sits by the door. Tell me when you're ready. I don't even want to be part of this group. And I'm like, okay. And so we attempt to get him to speak. He won't speak to us. So then all the other kids, I don't want him here. Send him away. Blah, blah. And, you know, a group mentality begins to manifest. And after a bit, I asked the girl whom he threw the horseshoe at what her thoughts were. And she said she didn't want him there. And why did she push him? Well, because he said something about her and who knows what. I don't remember exact in details the story. But what I ended up asking her was, well, why do you think he acted that way? And of course, naturally, most kids, oh, he's a jerk, he's a bully, blah, 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 blah. Well, what makes someone be a bully? So we started having the conversation about what causes. Now, I know his story, but nobody else does. And I don't want to discuss it. If he's not going to discuss it, I'm not going to. So I remained calm, not disclosing anything, but getting them to think, why is it that you think this person's acting this way? And so the conversation then begins to turn to other kids talking about when they have a bad day and how they act out on other people. And maybe people have bad things happen in their lives. And so on and so forth, until the group finally says, okay, well, no, well, has anybody ever talked to him and asked him why he's acting the way he is? So the girl who he threw the horseshoe at got up and went over and started to talk to him, and he refused to talk to her. And she just shrugged her shoulders. I'm like, well, do we give up when people are angry? Well, no. And what do we say? You know. Anyway, conversation, long story short, we end up getting to where the kids start saying, we don't want you to go. We want you to stay. You're part of this group, and we want you here. And now here's the point. As this is all unfolding, I'm standing off. I mean, I started the conversation, and then they took it. And I'm standing off to the side, and I'm watching the interactions. And an hour previous, these people are screaming and yelling at each other, and there's lots of anger and upset. But now, there's compassion and understanding and reaching out for inclusiveness. We don't want you to leave. We want you to be here. And then, all on their own, these teenagers started telling the kid things they liked about him. I never even put that out there. They just started doing it. They just started saying how he was funny and he made them laugh. And the reason why they want him to stay is because he lightens up the day or he makes eating fun. And they, on their own, just started coming up with reasons for this kid to stay. And before I knew it, this kid stood up and the girl who he threw the horseshoe at is hugging him. I'm going to cry. I'm crying. She's hugging him. And then the whole group gets up. I had nothing to do with that. Absolutely nothing. To me, that was divine intervention. I set in motion an event, and it went without my hands involved in it. Without my hands involved in it at all. It's kind of like you just set it off, decide. But when that happened, now this happened, I'm going to say, at least 15, 20 years ago. And it still gets me. It still gets me when you think about what happens when we let go and let things unfold. Now, I know that 12-step programs often talk about let go, let God. And it's a little hard to understand. I mean, you know, you have to pay the rent, so you can't just let God pay your rent for you, and you got to cook a meal. If you're not cooking, you're not eating. So there's a sense of responsibility, but then there's also the knowing of letting go. I can't do everything. We're limited. We can't do everything. As a matter of fact, the philosophy is, or you know, grant the serenity prayer. Grant me the understanding to know what I control, what I can't. I totally botched that up, but you understand. And the wisdom to know the difference. When do I interject and when do I pull back? So 20 years ago, when that whole scene was unfolding, I was in awe. I was in absolute awe that I was watching what appeared to be divine intervention. And I had nothing to do with it. And it was so moving and beautiful that these kids came together on their own. They all came together on their own. And I remember a few years later, I had run into the family, the relative, and they had thanked me profusely for how much I had done. And I didn't do anything. I mean, that's really the absolute divine truth. Nothing. I didn't do anything. That was all them. And all him, I would say, as well. I've often wondered whatever happened to him, like if he ever continued on with his path. And, you know, when I think about that story, I think to myself, the thing that I identify with the most is being the outcast, the one that nobody wants, always on the outside looking in. I felt that my whole life. And so here's this kid, and perhaps maybe the first time in his life people wanted him, and they wanted him to belong. And maybe it was necessary for me to step out, well, I'm going to say it was necessary for me to step out of the way so they could engage him and bring him back. I was limited to my own mindset of, you know, the structure of how you handle kids, and the kids did it themselves. So back to the concept of, you know, divine intervention, stepping back and recognizing when I participate and when I've got to let it go. Any parent will tell you it's terrifying when you hand the keys to your child and here you go, you can borrow the car. Any parent will tell you how terrifying that is because you can't control the outcome. We're not there to protect them. We have to let go. Any parent will tell you that. It's nerve-wracking to know when our child goes off. But then we get used to it. And then we have to remember what it was like when we were a teenager and we wanted to step out on our own and start doing things for ourselves, make our own choices and whatnot. We're so accustomed to taking care of people, and then we have to let that go and trust that we've prepared them enough to move forward. So then I would introduce that concept of trust. Divine intervention requires trust. If things aren't going the way that we want them to go, we would need to trust that there's something else working out. There's some other plan working out. I've heard lots of stories of people who applied for a position and they were so dedicated and committed to getting that job and they didn't get it and they were heartbroken and devastated. They had their hopes up only to discover 2 weeks later they get offered from another job, a different job which is better for them. You could substitute anything in there, a relationship. You could put a relationship in there. You're hoping and hoping and then it doesn't work and then, oh, turn around and something better comes along. Now, is that necessarily always going to happen? No. Sometimes something worse comes along, but that too passes and something else comes along. So when it comes to the concept of divine intervention, I am a fan of recognizing when something outside of me is at work. I'm a fan of that. There's little techniques and tricks that you can do, but the first and foremost thing we have to remember is to remove the attachment. Set something in motion, but remove the attachment. Remove the emotional attachment. Just let it unfold. And if it goes the way they want, that's great. And if it doesn't go the way we want, that's great too. Having acceptance of how things unfold is probably the best for everyone. If I'm upset because things aren't going to go the way, then the people in my life are going to feel that upset, which might cause a chain reaction, and they'll take it down. Take it down. I heard a great story of a man who was talking to his son, and his son had a really bad day at school, so he's snapping at the table and snapping at the mom, and the father said to the son, "Hey, what's going on?" And the little kid said, "Oh, well, this happened and this happened." And he said, "But none of us did any of that. Why are you yelling at us? Why are you taking it out on us?" And then the father proceeded to explain to the boy, "Do you know when I have a bad day at work?" "Well, no." "Do you know when I have a good day at work?" "No." "Well, that's the idea. You leave work outside. When you come home, you don't take it out on the people that you love." So the concept was to, whatever is unfolding, to practice acceptance and letting it go. There's a reason for things. I mean, I probably didn't do justice to the story, but it was a very good story about explaining that consequences of our actions are really a result of the way we handle them. If I come from a position of, okay, let's see what we can work with here, then I will most likely have a positive outcome. If I come from a position of, oh, drats, that's not what I wanted, I most likely will struggle. And it'll take me a little longer to get through the event. When I think about divine intervention, I really don't think that God is up there like playing a game of chess, manipulating things. But I do believe that there's a force at play, whether you want to call it the force of love or compassion or humanity. But there is an underlying current that connects us. And I feel like that when we tap into divine intervention, it's like tapping into that force that connects us, that universal connectivity that we have. And that lifts us up. And for that, we can experience a great deal of gratitude. So that's all I really wanted to say on divine intervention. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. And again, I deeply wish to express my gratitude to all of our Omega family. I wish that you have a wonderful day of Thanksgiving with your family, embracing everyone who comes to cross your path, and good luck on your Friday shopping, if that's what you do. I look forward to seeing you in December for our Monday night workshop. Until then, have a wonderful evening and recognize divine interventions. Bye now.